Hello, welcome to another poem annotation. I still have not managed to get a hold of a document camera, so hopefully it's not too shaky. This poem is Those Winter Sundays by Robert Hayden. Again, I hope you've already read this poem and maybe made some annotations of your own, but we will go ahead and discuss this one now. Do follow along, make annotations on your copy of the poem, and pause the video to answer any questions that I ask. So I'm just going to give a brief reading of the poem first. Sundays too, my father got up early and put his clothes on in the blue-black cold, then with cracked hands that ached from labor in the weekday weather made banked fires blaze. No one ever thanked him. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. When the rooms were warm, he'd call, and slowly I would rise and dress, fearing the chronic angers of that house, speaking indifferently to him who had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. What did I know of love's austere and lonely offices? Okay, so many of the poems that we discussed yesterday, we said, had themes of love, of death, of growing up, and I think this is another poem that fits into that. So let's look at the title first. We have Those Winter Sundays. So I think the word those implies that this is not just one Sunday, this is several, probably over the course of a childhood, right? Winter, we have some connotations there. You can think of, what do you think of when you think of the season winter? Maybe take some notes on that. And then Sundays, I think also some connotations. What do we think of when we think of Sundays? As opposed to the weekday, right? So day of rest, in Christianity particularly, so I would say there's a bit of the Christian tradition here. So we have some words here that you can examine the connotations of in the title and for your own notes. Okay, so if we look at the first stanza, we have two sentences. We have a very long sentence with a lot of enjambment and some other sound devices that I think are interesting, worthy of looking at, and then a very short sentence. So let's look at this long sentence first. So Sundays, again, we have our various connotations there. It's a day of rest. But in this case, is it a day of rest for the father? No. He got up early. And it's winter Sundays, so there's a lot of imagery here that makes you feel kind of the physicality of the father's work and how uncomfortable it is. You have cracked hands that ached from labor. It's the blue-black cold. So this would be an example of synesthesia, where we get the combination of two senses. So we have some visual imagery, blue, black, you think color, but it's used to describe cold, kinesthetic imagery. So blue, black, cold, what does that make us think of? You can jot down your own ideas, but I'm thinking like ice, darkness, and again, in winter it's darker more than it is in the summer. So it's dark, it's icy, it's uncomfortable. There's some sound devices in this first sentence too, which I think are interesting. Close, blue, black, cold, cracked. So the repetition of the C sound, we have some consonants. And you can talk about what the effect of that consonance is. It's kind of a harsh sound there. That's not a Visco girl. This is so that one's for you, Liz. But we have a kind of a harsh consonance there, which makes us think of the harshness of the labor. Close as well. Close, black, cold, cracked, ached. Yeah, so what can we say about the father from this first sentence? He's a laborer. He does this just kind of as a matter of course. And notice that our speaker says in a very short sentence, no one ever thanked him. So we get the sense that the speaker is probably looking back on his childhood. We get that also from the last two lines. And he's remembering that the father did these things as a matter of course every day. It's Sundays too. So this would also happen during the week, but it's also happening on Sunday. The father does not get a day of rest, right? He labors during the week, but he's also laboring on Sunday. And this is thankless. No one ever thanked him. And that's very short, abrupt, a simple sentence. Okay, so again, we have our narrator, our speaker speaking. I'd wake and hear the cold splintering, breaking. So some nice sound imagery here too, because you think of the cold splintering and breaking. You think of ice almost. You think of maybe the crackling of the fire, because we're talking, he's just mentioned the fire in the previous stanza. When the rooms were warm, he'd call. So the father, he waits until the house is warm, and then he wakes up the family. We don't know who else is in the family. We know that no one ever thanked him, so we get the sense that there isn't just the child and the father. Maybe there are more people. But the speaker also mentions the chronic angers of that house. There's no mention of a mother here. We get the sense that from the speaker's perspective, it maybe isn't a particularly happy house, the chronic angers that the speaker is fearing. But on the other hand, you do have the father waking up in the cold in the early morning and making the house warm. So there's a contrast of feelings there between the warmth and the cold. Okay, so as a typical child, the speaker doesn't want to get out of bed. Slowly I would rise and dress. That is probably an image that's familiar to all of you, right? It's not that cold in Hong Kong, but you don't want to leave your warm bed to go out into the house. Okay. And the speaker's relationship with the father, again, continues into the third stanza. He's speaking indifferently to him. So you guys are teenagers. This is you here. Oh, your parents might say, "Oh, how was your day?" And you're like, "Meh, okay, fine." Yeah, that's what the speaker is saying here, right? He's responding in this way to his father. He's being indifferent. But then we get some description of the father's actions. He had driven out the cold and polished my good shoes as well. So now as an adult, the speaker can look back on the things that his father did for him. But at the time, he spoke indifferently to him. He was rising slowly, so he didn't appreciate what he had, maybe. And I think that's an interesting kind of thematic point in the poem that you might use in a comparison. And then, of course, we have our last two lines. What did I know? What did I know? So here we have some repetition. You can think and take down in your notes maybe what the effect of that repetition is. That's something worth considering, I think. So have a think about that. Love's austere and lonely offices. So austere, what does this word mean, and why is it interesting that he's using it to describe love? That's something worth considering. So take a second, do some vocab work. What does austere mean, and why is he using it to describe love? And lonely, using the word lonely to describe love as well. So what could we say about that? Whose love is lonely here? And offices. Okay, so offices is used in a different context here. You can think of office as in like an office building, where people go to work. But office also has in a religious context. So again, our Sundays, it means certain like rites and rituals, basically. So love's austere and lonely offices. So the rites and rituals of love, which he describes as being austere and lonely. So what does he mean by that? What does he mean by that line? Something worth considering, I think. So I think that is a pretty good overview of the poem. There's obviously more that you can consider, and if you choose to write about this poem for your critical essay, you'll want to take a closer look probably at structure. So this poem, obviously different than, say, a Shakespearean sonnet, so you might want to take a look at the lack of rhyme, the use of enjambment, the use of some short sentences and end stop, things worth considering. With that, I think, though, I'm going to end my commentary on the poem. So you have Ozymandias, you have Those Winter Sundays, you have my comments, you have your own annotations, and you have a short assignment, which is to take a photo of your annotations on the two poems and upload them to today's Gibbon so that I can see that you are working your way through these poems. We'll address a couple more next week, and I will be in touch. Thank you.